Hi, everybody, and welcome to another episode of My Community. Today's episode is once again struggle. Our lovely guest for the evening is Chris. How you doing, Chris?
How's it going? Thank you for having me.
Of course, always a pleasure seeing you, my guy. Chris, why don't you tell the audience a little bit about yourself?
Yeah. I guess what I'm going to be talking about today is I was in a 11-year abusive relationship where for the last three we were married, and it really dealing with it, processing it has taken me years. Still not totally healed, but on the path to recovery. And it's particularly when you talk about these types of abusive, toxic relationships, a lot of people, there's a stigma attached to it. There's a shame attached to it. But for me, I find it cathartic. I find it helpful in my process to talk about it, to tell that story, because every time I do, it gives me a new frame because I'm talking to a new person about this story, and it allows me to frame it in a way that helps me process. And so that's really why I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, absolutely, bud. I think we both can agree that having these kind of conversations, although obviously sometimes difficult, sometimes challenging, they are cathartic and they do help us compartmentalize like our thoughts and bounce each other off ideas and basically just kind of get through what we're kind of going through at the moment or just whatever we need to talk about in that given day. Chris, the floor is yours, bud. If you're ready to share your story as it was.
Yeah. So I'm gonna break it up into two pieces. First is going to be, how I was feeling in the relationship itself, kind of how I processed, how I dealt, how I survived, and all of that with the benefit of hindsight, being able to recognize what I was doing. I think we were chatting before we started recording that it's really hard in the moment to see things for what they are, to give yourself that grace. But in the freedom that I have now, been able to recognize and really boost myself in terms of my responses and how I was dealing with it at the time. And then the second part is obviously, after leaving my ex-wife, how I processed, how I healed, how I continue to heal. I met this girl when we were still in college. I had just turned 20 when we started dating. And for the first, year and a half, it was great. We were very happy together. She was very compassionate and loving, all the things that I thought I was looking for. And then slowly but surely, things started to change. She became more closed off. She stopped caring about my feelings, my emotions, how I was doing. It was a lot of, you need to be doing better. And that in and of itself wasn't abusive, but it started to show me, looking back, who she was as a person. The person that I knew for that first year and a half was putting on a facade for me. And so for the next, 9, 10 years, I was with this person. And, we moved in together. Things just continued to get progressively more difficult and just harder for me. And while I was in it, I was convinced, I love this person. They're my person. I'm going to stick by them. I would, make excuses for her. I would justify her actions. I would, defend her. And, it's when you're in that type of relationship, it's really easy from the outside to be like, why don't you just leave? Like if the things that your partner is doing to you hurt, or, you're constantly, scared, and it doesn't have to be physical scared, but yeah, for me, by the end, I was afraid every minute of every day that I would do something that would just get me yelled at, that would get me, that would have her tell me that I'm dumb or that I'm lazy.
Do you think it's like a form of like emotional conditioning almost that she like indoctrinated this kind of mindset in you that you were always, I guess, maybe in the wrong or you need to improve or just do better?
I think conditioning I think gives her more agency. I really don't think that it was an intentional, I want to make this person scared, but it absolutely was a form of control. You know, the way that I was operating, like I think you put it perfectly, like I'm always in the wrong. And, you know, it manifested in ways that, you know, something not related to me at all would go wrong. And then I would get either a call or I would be with her and she would turn to me and tell me that it's my fault and that I needed to fix it. Even though it could be her card isn't going through because of some bank error. And it's, no, Chris, you need to fix this right now.
Yeah, and I think for situations like that, especially Chris, that's when people and I don't want to throw shade on this person, but I mean just people in general have a sort of lack of accountability for their own actions, right? So they tend to place blame on other people because they don't know how to take on the things that are going on in their own life.
Absolutely. And, you know, I think, and a little bit of foreshadowing after I left, after I left my ex-wife, one of the first real things that I had to contend with was, you know, that justification. Oh, she's doing this because she loves me. She's doing this because she wants me to be a better partner to her, to be a better person. When in fact, you know, and my therapist told me at the time, like, he's like, I don't even know if she's capable of that. And so, you know, yes, it's 100% an inability to take accountability. It's also, it just might be something that she's unable to do. Maybe she is, maybe she isn't. But for me, as my partner, she was not. She was not able to show me any sort of love and kindness and affection. And so, you know, now looking back at that, particularly the time after our wedding, while we were married, looking back at it, I see a lot of survival. You know, I'm doing things like, I think a mild example would be if I washed my hands and the sink was wet after I used the faucet to wash my hands, I'd get yelled at. It'd be, why is the sink wet? This is disgusting. How could you do this? And so I would, you know, wash my hands, make sure that no water got anywhere else, would dry my hands and then dry the sink. And these were just like these learned behaviors to try and avoid getting yelled at. I mean, it's not fair to do to any human being, but you know, it's, I think a good example of just the real ways that I developed to survive. And in the middle of it, you know, I was depressed. I was very anxious. And I was always struggling to, you know, I need to love myself. Like I got to give myself grace. I got to give myself compassion. And I was always struggling for it. Going to therapy, looking at pharmaceuticals, like going to a psychiatrist to try and do it. And I was always feeling this like, oh, I don't love myself enough. And now I look back on it and I think the complete opposite. You know, I think, oh, I love myself enough to develop these survival because I needed to protect myself. And even just the act of trying to love myself is the biggest example of you actually loving yourself. You know, it's, if you are trying to love yourself and you feel like you're failing, where do you think that trying comes from? It's just, and so now I can look back on it And I still, there are times when I remember certain experiences, or I remember certain ways that I behaved, and my heart is still pounding. I feel that it's like a visceral fear reaction, but I can look back on it now and say, you know what? I was surviving, and I have to give myself that kind of grace. And so that's what it was really like in the middle of it.
As far as I guess like the tipping point or something like that, was there a specific moment where it was like, okay, it's time to get the fuck out of here?
I mean, so there was, I think, so I left her in the week before Thanksgiving 2022.
Okay.
And I think what precipitated the split was we had just a terrible Halloween where, she had asked me to make costumes for us when she'd been with me for 10, 11 years. She knew that's not the type of creative that I am.
Mm-hmm.
But then, so I'm trying to like make these costumes for us. We go to the party, and at the party in front of many people is just saying, oh, Chris is inept. He couldn't do this. And, for the longest time, I would have just accepted it and been like, oh, like, yes, you're right. I did a shit job. I must be inept at this. But at that point, I had finally gotten into a job where I felt fulfilled. I didn't dread going to work. I was excited by the work, in fact.
Mm-hmm.
And so I knew that the way that I was feeling wasn't a product of my work environment. It was a product of my home environment. And so I got angry, and I stayed angry. And that was like revolutionary for me. Mm-hmm. But I was still trying. I was like, listen, I want to talk this through. I want to work it out. So for almost a month, I'm feeling this anger, wanting to work it out, and she refused. And so week before Thanksgiving, it comes to a head where, clearly we haven't really spoken in weeks. And we together make the decision, okay, we're going to spend Thanksgiving separately. I said, I'm going to move out. I was lucky beyond my years that the Tuesday before I left, we had moved my grandmother, who lived in DC with me, out of the apartment that she had lived in for 40 years. Moved her into a independent living facility. This apartment was vacant, freshly vacant. And so I was like, listen, like I have a place to go. I can go and it'll be fine. So I left, I moved out, and this is the one part of me telling the story where I'm almost guaranteed to tear up, because the grandfather that lived in that apartment, I was unbelievably close to. I mean, he passed in 2013. He's still the background, the wallpaper on my phone. And he lived in that apartment. That's the only apartment I've ever known him to live in. And so I moved into this apartment on a Friday, and, my family in the area had come and helped me get some stuff so it didn't look like I was completely squatting. But they left, and I sat down, and I felt his love. And I hadn't felt love like that in years, because I was made to I could not be with my family. I couldn't be with my friends. So I didn't have any of that kind of love. And it was almost like an immediate, like, I got you, dude. And I cried. I was just by myself in this apartment crying, not because I was leaving my ex-wife. I was, oh my God, this is what I can be loved. I am loved. And so it was like a light switch flicked for me. And I knew I wasn't ever going to go back. Yeah. We had talked, okay, this is just like, we'll go a week or two and see, and like come back together and talk things through. I knew almost immediately, I am never going back. A weight was off my shoulders. I was feeling loved. No, thank you. I'm not going to go back into that situation again. And so that was how it all came about. It was like very quick, and honestly, it was kind of what I needed, like a ripping of the Band-Aid, to move out. And then my healing started.
Yeah, dude, that was first of all that was beautiful, man. Because I wasn't even privy to that portion, and that was really special, Chris. So thank you for sharing that. And that was almost like spiritual and like sort of metaphysical. So
Yeah.
dude, I'm glad your grandfather gave you that warmth and comfort that you needed in those times of sorrow, as it were. But I guess this is like the turning point in the story, right?
Yeah,
This is now the redemption arc for Christopher.
Yes.
So please
Yeah.
continue, my friend.
So for that, the first couple months, I was feeling on top of the world. It was like, I am free. I can do what I want. I can go, I can buy what I want. Because she had total control over our finances and never let me do anything for myself. And all of a sudden I had all this freedom. And I could get a PlayStation. I can play video games. I can go out with friends. I went to Asbury for the first time in years because I didn't have anyone telling me I couldn't. Seeing my friends, reconnecting with friends. And I think that was one of the biggest things that surprised me, but shouldn't have surprised me, was that the friends that really matter, the friends that truly were like friends and brothers and sisters, were immediately, yep. Oh, Chris was in the wilderness for a little bit. He's back. Nothing has changed about our love for him. We're here. And so it was great. And then, March comes around. Then the summer comes around. And it's not that the reality of what happened set in, but it was the freshness and I've heard it described as rose-colored glasses. They got lifted. And all of a sudden, oh, I have lots of trauma that I now need to deal with. Like the hand washing thing. I would continue for months drying out the sink, even though I knew, like logically I knew she's not here. She's never going to be able to talk to me like that again. And I still would do it because it had become such an ingrained fear. And so that I started to actually recognize these behaviors. And so that first summer was, I think, one of the darkest summers I've ever had. Because I started to feel I'm broken. There's something just wrong with me. That another person could treat me the way that I was treated, that I still was continuing to turn it in on myself of I'm wrong. I am the problem because someone treated me like that. And, at that point it was the reason that I'm able to sit here and talk about it is because of, the support system that I had in DC. I had people, not a lot, because I had to recreate an entire community around me. But the few that I had were every day, checking in. Hey, what's going on? What are you doing today? Hey, I'm going to do this. Come with me. Not how are you feeling? It is, actual, I am being present for you. Even if it was something as small as, hey, I'm going on a walk. Why don't you come with me? And that's why I'm able to sit here and talk about it. And I started to slowly feel better about myself. Not all the time, but the bad days weren't so bad anymore. There's this quote from a Brandon Sanderson book, and I use it all the time. I think I don't even care if people get tired of it, because it is, to me, the most perfect encapsulation of how life really is. The character in the book is depressed, like, and I identify with the character so much because the way that his depression manifests as mine is the same way that mine does. But he's told like it's going to get worse. And so the depressed character is like, well, if you tell me it's going to get worse, then what's the point? And then the guy he's talking to goes, yeah, I told you it's going to get worse, but then it's going to get better. Then it's going to get worse, then better. That's life. And I'm not going to sit here and lie and tell you that every day is going to be sunshine, but there will be sunshine again. And that's a very different thing to say. And so to me, that summer was that. I was going down, down, down. It felt like every day was worse than the last. I was alone. This is just absolutely horrible. Like, why do I want to continue to wake up every day to this feeling? And then it changed. Then it started to get better. And in the years since, it's gotten worse, and then it's gotten better. It's like, it's to a T. And it's a lot of, reckoning with my thoughts, with my feelings, going to therapy and really putting in work in therapy. Doesn't mean that I go every week. At some points I would. At some points it was once a month. It was dependent, but every time that I went, I would almost make a list of, okay, these are the things that have happened to me since I last saw my therapist. These are the feelings that I've had associated with those things. It's not like I'm going and updating him on my life. I'm going and saying, okay, this is what happened. I felt this. And then I would work through it. It was a lot of doing exactly what we're doing now, of me talking about it. It took me a while to even call what happened to me abuse. Not because I thought that what happened to me was not abuse because it didn't turn physical, but because I didn't want to believe that I had been abused, or that that my ex-wife could abuse. When in fact, yeah, that is what happened. And there have been times where I've told friends some of the things that she would do to me, and sometimes they would laugh because my coping mechanism is humor. And then I think one of the turning points in that was I told a story thinking that I would elicit laughs, and the whole table got quiet, and they're like, whoa, Chris, wait a minute. Like that is really not okay. Like, that you're making a joke about it, but like, I want you to know that's not okay. And it's a constant series of revelations, of reframings that have taken me to the point where I feel hopeful. And I continue to go through ups and downs. I actually very recently went through a pretty down period of time. But I always, because I got through that first summer, I've never been that far down where, at that point I would almost avoid, my apartment was on the 16th floor. I had a balcony. I wouldn't avoid the balcony, but I was like nervous being around it. And I know now that if I got through that, okay, yeah, I'm feeling terrible right now. Like I'm just miserable, can't do anything. Like, actually, it's like getting out of bed is a struggle, but I know I'm going to get through it. And so it's a lot of trying to remind myself that I'm stronger than I think I am.
Chris, that was beautiful. Once again, I'm trying to think of stuff to add, but I really I was moved by it because I feel the story that you told is a story that I feel like a lot of people in the mental health community deal with, which is that you versus you challenge that people face, right? Where it's the quest for self-improvement and the biggest enemy in your life. And this is going to be till the end of time, man. It doesn't matter who you are. It doesn't matter what you do. Your biggest enemy in life is yourself. and you have to challenge yourself and fight yourself and go toe to toe with yourself every single day. That's a thing that we do as human beings every day, and it is sometimes as uh, complex as dealing with something like you went through, or sometimes as quote unquote simplistic as just getting out of bed. But these moments, these are the things that define us. And buddy, I have 100% confidence you're gonna kick Chris Habibi's ass
Thank you.
up and down the street if you need to, my guy.
Thank you. The one last thing I want to say is that, when it comes to how, like, whoever's listening to this right now, you might be thinking, oh, what I went through wasn't as bad as what Chris went through. So like there's that difference somehow means that I should be dealing with my shit better. And that is the absolute 100% wrong. Like, objectively wrong, because what you went through and how you're feeling might be the same way that I'm feeling or that I felt. But just because you think that it's somehow less intense or less bad doesn't make it any less bad for you. And so all that to say, you can continue to love yourself and work on yourself, and don't diminish the shit that you go through, because the only way that you're not going to get over it is by saying, I don't need to.
Absolutely, buddy. I think that's a beautiful note to end on. Before I sign off, is there any extra thing you want to say, or are you good to go, big guy?
I think ending it off with the ending of that Sanderson quote, which is, "You will be warm again."
I love it. I love it. Thanks again for tuning in, guys. Next episode, we'll talk about the cure for cancer. Who knows what we'll talk about. All right. Have a good one.